Hello, Ecclesia. Pastor Ian Graham here. We had a great gathering this past Sunday, and during our sermon and our message time, we approached a really difficult subject, looking at the images of violence, sometimes divinely sanctioned violence in the Old Testament. And we looked at them both in the stories themselves, and we looked at them through the lens of Jesus' life, and specifically his death on the cross. And so many people commented. They said, the message was really powerful, but we want more. One of the comments I made during the sermon was that we didn't have time to go into all of the debates around this issue. And people were like, no, you need to make time. And so what I wanted to do today was just offer a brief addendum to our time together, and then to promise that at some point we're going to do a full series on this image of what Greg Boyd calls the warrior God. And I'm using Greg Boyd's book. This is one of them. It's about a 1,300-page treatise on the divine images of God in the Old Testament and how those can be fully inspired. And 2 points that Boyd makes, two among many, that I think are really important for us is first, Boyd, like I do, upholds that the scriptures are thoroughly divinely inspired. But what Boyd draws out is that inspiration does not mean that every little letter that we have, every little thing that we have is a direct reflection of God. That inspiration is a process of God working through humanity. If you think about the way that the canon was even established, there was never a point where God said it will be these books and no others. This is the Old Testament, this is the New Testament, these 66 books make up the Bible. That never happens. That process plays out over the course of history. And so God, even in the construction of the book that would reveal himself fully, is working in and through the lives of human beings. Working in and through their flaws, working in and through even their short-sightedness or their misconceptions about who God is. And so Boyd thoroughly upholds 2 Timothy 3:16, where it says that all Scripture is God-breathed. And then he draws out the process for that God-breathing. That God works through the individual talents of each of the authors, that God works through their own lenses. And so Boyd does a really great job of that. The second thing that I think is so amazing and so important about Boyd's thesis is that Boyd draws out that on the cross, Jesus is bearing the sin of the world. That Jesus is revealing who God always is, always has been, and always will be. God is the sin-bearing God, emptying himself on behalf of the world. And the genius of Boyd's thesis is that God didn't become the sin-bearing God on the cross. God has always been bearing the sin of the world. Now, he does it fully and finally on the cross, and there's a very important historical aspect to that. But throughout the course of the history of the people of God, God has been bearing our ill-conceived conceptions of him. And so you have to remember, when God redeems the people of Israel from Egypt, he redeems people that live in a real time and space, a real culture. And some of their expectations of God are that God would be a warrior God, that God would give them victory in battle. And it's just possible that they impose some of those presuppositions onto God. And Boyd argues that this is happening throughout the scripture just as it happens on the cross. Remember, so much of the reasons, at least from a historical standpoint, that Jesus is crucified is because he doesn't fit the perceptions of what people would think that God would be. And so I think Boyd offers some incredible insights into how both the scriptures can be thoroughly God-breathed, and they can still testify to the God revealed in Jesus. And the important verse for this is Hebrews 1:1-3, that in the past God has spoken in many ways, but now he has spoken fully and finally through his Son, who is the exact representation of his being. I look forward to discussing these kinds of things and more with you, Ecclesia. I look forward to us humbling ourselves and being intellectually honest. And I look forward to our next gathering together on February 17th at the Princeton Garden Theater.